Welcome to the Church Nerdiest Members Podcast. This is Andrew. So I was going around on Reddit and just checking out what they had. And of course, the Episcopalian subreddit never fails to bring up something worth considering or thinking about or exploring for yourself. An original poster, Excellent Hamster 2020, asked, "Is there a monastic-style organization out there available to me? I am a married woman, an academic by profession. I'm also a lifelong Episcopalian, and prior to the pandemic, have been extremely involved in my parish, both on Sunday services and in parish life and community outreach. I'm also a member of the Daughters of the King. My question is about forming or joining a community of faith, not unlike a monastic order that follows a rule of life and offers a lot of support to members following that rule. I'd be very interested in finding a group that not only offers broad suggestions on how to live like Daughters of the King, but also really provides a cohesive group. Ideally, I'd love for this to be an organization that meets or checks in daily, prays the daily office and other prayers together, has richly intellectual discussions on scripture and church tradition, and provides a social outlet. It would also, ideally, be a place for group confession of sin, penance, and healing, like the early church did together. Is there something like this that exists? How does one go about finding such a group? Is it possible to take part in such a group in the modern world?" Now, this is an excellent question from the original poster, the OP. And I have some pretty strong feelings about it, having done something similar in my early adult life. Let me tell you about that before we go on looking at what others have commented to this Reddit post. My experience was something called the Bishop's Mission Corps here in Mississippi. Back in 2008, we had what the bishop at the time, Bishop Gray III, he had instituted a organization or a mission that would, in his words, train future leaders in the church. And so what that meant was it started out as a program where young people, either in college or just out of college, could spend some time of that summer break, 40 days specifically, living in one of the cottages, one of the chalets at our diocesan camp and conference center. And so these people would live in rooms in that common chalet, and they would cook for themselves and pray the daily office and keep periods of holy silence, and would also work in the nearby community of Canton, Mississippi, and also do work for the conference center grounds itself, maintenance and upkeep, things like that. And so it was definitely a work of, labor with your hands, but also with your prayer, ora et labora, prayer and work. And it was a really good program. In fact, it even spawned a extension program, I should say, that also did a 9-month kind of long-term monastic experience. And so you had several years of people choosing to do that 40-day monastic experience. And then there was one program that did a 9-month long-term monastic experience. And those people lived in, I believe, Corinth, Mississippi, at a church there, and worked in the community. And so I did this the summer of 2008, and I was prepared to do it, to be the leader of that group, the summer of 2009. However, with the bishop going abroad to, I think it was Lambeth Conference or sabbatical in Africa, I can't remember. That program didn't make that next year because there weren't enough people to do it. And then it kind of fizzled out from there. It was a kind of expensive program because you were giving a very modest stipend to the individuals who were doing it so they could buy groceries. And then you were also essentially renting out the cottage at the conference center for 40 days. And so the conference center wasn't making money on those rooms. It was, of course, led by 2 priests in the diocese who would take turns living with us for a week. So there was a week on for one priest, a week on for another priest. And they would flip-flop back and forth and work with us to train us and give us really rich education that was actually accredited through the School of Theology at the University of the South. Also, there was Brother Vincent, who lives at the Benedictine monastery in Natchez, Mississippi, and he came over and spent a week with us. And so it was really nice to have a vowed brother helping us kind of explore what the monastic life was like. And we kept the Benedictine rule. We read from it daily. We listened to lectures and to essays on the rule as we ate. The first thing we did when we woke up was do our daily run, and then the first words out of our mouth were morning prayer, words of praise to God. And the last words we said when we went to sleep at night was Compline together. It was an amazing experience, but enough about that. Well, I will say before I move on that it really did help me become a leader in the church. The whole point of the Bishop's Mission Corps was not to train priests necessarily. However, I will say that several people in that group did eventually go on to seminary and take on holy orders. For me, it was a really valuable vocational experience because at the summer I did that, I was discerning how I was going to leave a previous job, but also what job I was going to move into at the end of the summer once the fall began. So it was a time of prayerful contemplation that saw me removed from the wider world. And also there wasn't, TV just like if it was just me, I would have sat on the couch for a summer and watched TV, and then maybe in the back of my head thought about what I might want to do. This gave me a very dedicated time to leave all that behind and to really focus on what I wanted to do. It also really helped me understand, for me, intentionality, that what I was doing for God, and the really banal menial chores that I was doing as an act of prayer. When it was like, if you had bathroom duty and you were cleaning everyone's bathroom floors and scrubbing the toilets, that was an act of prayer with your hands and your labor. When you were spraying the goose poop off the sidewalks of the conference center, that was a prayer. That was a meditation. That was an act of prayer. So everything became prayerful, and I really, really appreciated that. And I really attribute the Benedictine rule and the structure that we were given to live under as something that helped me really live into an active prayer, a prayer of activity, and not just a prayer of sitting and being quiet and closing your eyes and being still. And so that was a really valuable experience, and I have always reflected back on that and brought those lessons forward. So what do others say about the OP's question? Well, Volunteer Fire Department says that www.spiritualimagination.org might be what you're looking for. There are different levels of participation. There's the Explorer's Path, where you're welcome to join in any of the public programs and pray or study through public offerings and liturgies. It's a great way to experiment with the prayer practices that are taught in order to see what speaks to a person's sense of spirituality. There's the participant path, which you can begin more seriously engaging with the rule and the rhythm of life, and meet with members for spiritual direction. And they can help, those spiritual directors can help you adopt practices to suit individual needs. Typically, members in this space join in what's called an incarnation small group and have a chance to journey and pray with people. This level of belonging requires a commitment to daily prayer, mutual accountability, and a desire to grow spiritually by adopting a process that combines 12-step spirituality with different monastic practices. And then there is the next level described, which is the vowed path. And those are for those who feel especially attracted to a vowed new monastic life and are invited to explore the possibility of joining that community. Members go through a comprehensive process of discernment, integral spiritual formation, monastic immersion, and in-depth study before being invited to take a seasonal vow and commitment to ongoing conversion of life. And so right now, with everything being online, this group, based in the Diocese of Long Island in New York, said that they are able to have people fully participate from a distance. And I think that is a really good thing to consider, especially if, if you are hearing this now, you are likely doing it via a device or a tablet or a phone or some podcast player. And so you are doing things virtually. And so where you can find things locally, and that local monastery or nunnery's or convent's ability to host people virtually may be very different. Case in point, I'm in Mississippi, and in Natchez, there is a small monastic community, a small Benedictine group of brothers, and they have oblates who live in and around the region that tend to the group and the community, both in prayer but also in local service. And so one thing you might consider, if a monastic community is something you are very interested in, but maybe you have already taken on other important vows. For example, you are married, you have children, or you have a home and a full-time job. You have taken on promises that you need to keep. And so dropping everything and taking on monastic vows might not be feasible or practical for you. So you might consider becoming an oblate of a established monastic community. And that lets you work in the world, but also be tied to that community and do that work. So that would be my first recommendation for people. Then you could also, of course, do something more fully immersive and become a member of that community. So there are Christian communities which are greatly dispersed, but connected, and those are kind of modified monastic groups. And then there are also much more celibate, isolated Cenobite communities that you would think of when you think of a monastery or a convent. In fact, St. Mary's Convent outside of Swanee, Tennessee, is an excellent example of sisters who live together in a beautiful setting, but again, they have a very isolated setting, and so their ability to host people virtually is pretty hard. In fact, you can't even really get a cell phone signal out there. But also, by the same token, that's part of the charm of where they are and what they get to do. Likewise, you have other communities that are available online. So if you are interested in this and more, I'm going to post the original posting in the show notes. But also, I'll just go ahead and say, go to the episcopalchurch.org/religious orders and faith communities, or you could just search Episcopal Religious Orders and Faith Communities. There are great examples there. Also, I would consider, the Order of St. Julian of Norwich, the Sisters of St. Gregory. Shout out to the Sisters of St. Mary in Swanee. But I have found that living in a seminary, especially when there are vowed sisters present in the community and kind of working not only in their own convent, but also having regular contact with the seminary. That was I really appreciated being in classes with, Sister Hannah and becoming friends with her. And getting to, serve the St. Mary's community as an acolyte or a thurifer. That was really special. And so if you get a chance to talk to a vowed monastic, I would strongly appreciate. You would strongly appreciate it, I imagine. I highly recommend it, and ask them about what it is that helps them continually live into a vow of long continued transformation through prayer and work and that ongoing conversion of life. I feel that is a really rich topic to discuss, especially with someone who has given up so much to be so close to God and the work of Christ in the world. Anyway, that's what I have to say about joining monastic communities or being involved in a monastic community, even though you are, let's say, already got a job or a family or already got your life kind of set up. And even if that is something that seems a little bit too much for you, go pick up the Rule of Benedict. You can get it for very inexpensive in print, or you can get it for free online. And just start reading it. There was a time where I was reading a chapter a day in my own private life beyond the Bishop's Mission Corps experience, and it really does help. Now, I will say that the Rule of Benedict is written to help the leaders, the abbots and abbesses of a monastic community, and how to resolve problems or disagreements within the community. So when you read it, not every chapter speaks to one's daily situation out in the world. However, that is not to say that you can't gain wisdom from the writing. It ties so much of what it aims to do with lines of Scripture that it becomes an amazing Bible study. So even if you are only reading it for its scriptural ties and references, it is time well spent. And that'll do it for this episode of the Church Nerdiest Podcast, the best podcast for the best patrons. If you have questions or suggestions for future episodes, please reach out. All of my contact information can be found at thechurchnerd.com. Thank you again for your support, and as always, God bless.